Hey, folks, we are live. Folks, welcome back to another Mañana No Mas podcast. I would love to say that I would do these on a regular basis or the second Tuesday of every month, but the reality is we just make these podcast shows when we find people of really high quality that we think would really resonate with our listeners and followers. And this show is no different. Hard to believe we're at episode 100 already. But what I would like to do is introduce you to a friend of mine that I've met over the last year. This is someone that, quite honestly, I didn't know very well. His name kind of jumped off in a Slack group. I started seeing him everywhere that I was going, different Zoom meetings. I'd see him pop up, and he always had something valuable to offer or to say, and his demeanor has always been kind and giving and generous. And so I thought this would be a really great opportunity to kind of profile and spotlight one of my new friends, James Lau. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kurt. Nice to have you. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome to the show. So, tell the listeners and viewers just a little bit about you, like just a little bit about your background and kind of, hey, I'm here. This is what I do.
Yeah, so name is James Lau. I'm actually based out of Boston, Massachusetts in the Northeast of the United States. I currently run a small solopreneur business right now, just with jameslaw.com. Most of the projects I work on is just relatively local as of right now. I focus on working with specifically nonprofit groups in and around the Boston area. But I also do work with other nonprofits on the East Coast as of right now. Why I choose to work with nonprofits? Because I like to kind of work alongside with them to help work with their organization and their mission statements. Really, that sing to me, really, because in the past I've been working with a lot of agencies and selling shoes, selling cars, selling shirts. It didn't feel like I was giving back to the community or society. So as a WordPress community member, I'm giving back by helping them build out their WordPress site, leveraging a lot of the tools and techniques coming out of the tech space, utilizing a lot of new plugins, giving them new, better options if they need to for their business and services. But also, just kind of working and elevating them in society in general, because a lot of the missions that they're targeting really, really needs a lot of voice. And so, helping them build a site makes a lot of sense.
That was one of the things that really jumped off to me about meeting you. And that was that discussion about nonprofits. When you and I first started exchanging Slack comments back and forth, I remember you were talking about working with nonprofits and things like that. And oddly enough, that's kind of how I would say I went from a hobbyist in the WordPress space to an agency in the WordPress space. I worked with organizations that held like racetrack events to generate, funding for different groups, whether it be for Children's Hospital or, veterans that, Gold Star families, things like that. And when you get involved in those kinds of projects, to your point, it feels like there's a purpose behind the work rather than just counting your pennies at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are some kind of like breakout nonprofits that you've helped, even if you can't share like the name or something? What are some breakout projects that really stood out to you that you've worked with?
Yeah, so it's a good question that you asked me that, because basically for the last year or so, I've been working with a nonprofit or children's youth organization over in Virginia. There's a local nonprofit organization right now that I'm working with called Quincy Cycles, Quinn Cycles, and basically it's to advocate for biking lanes, biking paths in the city area of Quincy. Trying to advocate for the neighborhood because there's about 30,000 of the population in Quincy is Asian. And so I'm trying to change their website, give them a better form in terms of donations, and also adding a language toggle on the site because a lot of the folks in this town can't speak or read English. So it's good to have a translation. And then there's also, I believe, there's a disaster accountability relief effort organization located in Maryland. I'm also helping out with. So yeah, it's a lot of bits and pieces of different projects.
Yeah, yeah. And sweet. I just did a project for Oregon Friendly Driver. And the project was commute options, and it was about biking, right? It was literally about, how bikes can get bike lanes, and the laws about so many feet from different vehicles. And, it was a e-learning project where they're using SCORM material
Hmm.
and driving, bike usage through a website and education. So that was a really cool project. When you think in terms of being an agency, so well, let's go back further. If I have this correct, when you first got like in tech, you were a developer, right? And then you kind of transitioned.
It's no, so my background is actually traditionally in graphic design. So I graduated as a design major, worked my way into sort of the early days of UX UI, if you will. But then I realized that, hey, I actually practice some code, during my time. I work with developers at different agencies, and I realized that I can speak to developers, I can code. So I kind of work my way into now more or less front end development, which is sort of my focus, where I can kind of translate and understand what a designer's intuition wants to be, and then and help understand that and relay that message back to a developer who don't necessarily understand design format.
I track what you're saying.
Yeah,
So you kind of act like someone that is like, I know what they want the website to look like, but a developer's not going to understand that unless we translate for them.
right. Yes.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, that makes a lot of sense. So you go from that to more of an agency perspective. James, when I met you, did we first meet on post status through Slack?
I think so. Yeah, and I just bombarded the Slack channels on post status. I also joined a bunch of just the random meetups that post status had set up. There was an agency meetup, there was a products meetup, and a professionalism meetup. It's like 3 times a week. uh,
So
week.
so here's where I'm going with this. There are a ton of people that I'm not going to say a ton of people listen to my podcast because that would be self-centered. But let's say that there's a ton of available people for this message. People that start an agency or start a business, and they're struggling for traction, they're struggling for growth, they're struggling to get noticed or seen. And then I see someone like you who 2 years ago I didn't know who you were. A year ago we connect, and I'm seeing you everywhere. So talk to me about like what was your process? Like what were you thinking when you were like, I'm going to bombard the Slack channel? Um, how did you feel that that gave you traction?
Oh, honestly, the Slack channels were my main gateway to actually communicating with people. As sort of a person who's personally a little shy to talk to people in front of people one on one physically, the Slack channel has made it a lot easier to just like have a long winded conversation about anything. And at that point, where I got to know some of the folks there, it's seeing them in person made it a lot easier. It almost felt like we were old friends.
Yeah.
So, but in terms of if you're not in the WordPress space and you're trying to break into business, it's really kind of hard. But I would strongly recommend, as everyone had recommended to me at the beginning, was to join your local, I think the BNC or your what's that called?
Chamber of Commerce or something like that.
Yes, Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, join those. I joined them, nervous as heck going in, but I just started talking to people, getting to know them, they're like anyone else, really. They
Yeah.
run a business, no matter great or small. They're just friendly people to talk to, really.
Yeah, and there's such an interesting thing to talk about here. So when I moved to Kansas, and it's only been a year, I found a thing called Startup Hutch in Hutchinson, Kansas, and they help startup companies launch their businesses. So I reach out to them, I tell them what I do. They put me on their podcast right away. They asked me to talk at City Hall. Turns out they have an entrepreneur meetup every month. They invite me to that. I meet 10 business owners the first month. I meet 5 or 6 more the next month. Then they tell me there's it was a diversity meetup thing. And I thought, well, you're talking to the wrong dude. I'm 56-year-old white dude because this was a year ago. And they said, no, 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 it's not like that. Just come on. It's all inclusive. And when I went, it really was inclusive. It turned out to be a really great event. I met another 10 or 12 business owners. And these weren't selling moments. These were just connection moments. They were just times to be like you and I talked about physical fitness and walking and biking once, right? So we would talk about art, or we would talk about microbrewed beer, or we would talk about playing soccer when we were kids. It didn't matter. We were making a connection, a business owner to business owner. And I think about, now a year has passed. And just like you said, when you're connected to different organizations and different networks, it's like there's a strength in that. There's a confidence that comes from that. And so now when I meet people within the neighborhood, there's 45,000 people in the city. When I meet other business owners, I have that strength of conversation to say, oh, do you know Terry from Quality Auto Body? Do you know so-and-so, and you have the ability to connect with even more people. And I think I've really seen that grow in you quite a bit.
No, absolutely. Yeah, you want to. It's the old saying when you're actually working for someone at a company, or when you're, interviewing for a job. You want to be able to interview the other person while they're interviewing you, and you want to be able to make sure that you're going to be comfortable working with them for a long period of time. I basically took that base and applied it to just when I go to Chamber of Commerce events or to any other networking events, whether they're within the WordPress community or outside. Just treat them as a friend, as a stranger, getting to know them. Talk about the venue that you're at, talk about the food, I don't know, anything. Pick something silly to talk about, the weather. It's okay. We're all just human beings in the end. And you'd be surprised how quickly you can strike an interesting conversation. Sometimes it could. I've been in weird conversations where, it leads to a dead end, and I'll just be like, "That's interesting. That's great." But it's nice to meet you. And you shake their hands and you walk off. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So now I want to stair step things up a little bit. So we talked about you were shy, you didn't like to do a lot of speaking, especially one-on-one. You broke in through these Slack channels, you started to break the ice, then you felt like you started to know some people, right? So I'm giving people kind of a pathway to entrepreneur success, right?
Mm.
So I read, from your submission, then you got into WordPress meetups, WordPress WordCamps, and I almost want to save this to the end and make it like a big crescendo, story arc, final moment. But you ended up just speaking at a WordCamp,
I did. Yep.
right?
Yeah.
So let's go through this in phases. Talk to me about getting involved in WordPress meetups and what that was like for you initially.
Yeah. So to go slightly back before the meetups, it was the first WordCamp that I actually ever attended
Mm,
last fall. And that's where I had met some of the big players within the WordPress community that were visible in post status. And it was really nice to meet those people. And that energized me in a way where I'm going to go to my local meetup and see who's there. Turns out that the same person who is running the Boston WordPress meetup organization was actually a speaker at WordCamp Rochester, New York last year. So
sweet.
that made it easier for me to kind of just talk to him, get to know him. We connected. And then I said, I would like to be an organizer. But at the same time, I also just went berserk on Meetup and just typed in WordPress Meetup. and just put my name in practically every single meetup that I could find that still exists, that hasn't been defunct, from East Coast all the way to West Coast. So there's folks who are in Seattle and they're like, "You're still up?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's 10 o'clock. It's okay. I'm here to meet you guys and see how you guys are doing,
Yeah.
Um, and that's just how it kind of grew, like just naturally connecting with people, knowing how, friendly everyone is. It made it a lot easier to the point where, yes, eventually I became an organizer at the beginning of 2024.
It's amazing when you think about the transition of that. And that's something that you and I also have in common. My first experience with the community was the San Diego Word Camp the year before. And then from that, I was like, I should probably check out my local meetup. And then I liked my local meetup, and they did a live one, and then they did a virtual one. So they did one that was live, like a general meetup, and then they did like a help desk virtual one on Zoom. So I was like, well, I think I'll check that out. And Steve was running that. And this guy named Steve, someone signs in with a problem, and he's like a dog with a bone. He will not give up. He will stay till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning working with these people to fix their websites, whether he knows them or not, and it's free. And I thought to myself, how much generosity does it take to really run one of these successfully? And so then, there are some, I'm going to call them famous, WordPress meetup people that do these virtuals. Like there's a guy named Eagle that I see in 4 or 5 different groups.
Yep,
See, you know him too. So,
Great
so
guy.
you see Eagle in all these Zoom windows, and you're like, this is crazy, the amount of commitment or generosity these folks have to keep plugging in. And so when I moved to Kansas, one of the things I noticed was there was no WordPress meetup here. And very similar to yourself, I was like, well, how do you pay it forward in the community? I guess you start one. And so I applied with WordPress, and now I run the Hutchinson, Kansas WordPress meetup.
Nice.
So you also organize a meetup, right?
Yep. Yeah.
What's your official meetup?
It's the Boston WordPress meetup group.
Excellent. And you guys do Zoom or in person?
So we only do in person, but lately I've been suggesting to do a bi-monthly where we meet physically, and then I will personally run the virtual one as a help desk, basically adopting Eagle's suggestion of doing a help desk, because that's actually where I also found, hey, I have a problem. I can only bug people so much on Slack channel, which is already still great as it is. But these are people who will be able to do live questions and everything. And I'm proposing that right now for the Boston WordPress meetup group.
That's sweet. I've thought about a similar thing. However, we meet live at a tap room, and I really like the beer. So it's kind of hard to go, hey, we're going to do this on Zoom. I'm like, hey, I could probably Zoom from the tap room. But it's also it's Pippin Williamson's tap room, which is kind of interesting, because I had no idea who Pippin. I kind of knew the name, but I didn't know that he lived here, or that when we moved here, it wasn't like a pre-planned thing. And now I end up hanging out with this guy at his own bar, which is kind of fun. So we get WordPress meetups out of the way, and I want to keep the conversation going, because listeners and viewers, they get impatient, right? So the next step of this conversation is WordCamps. Next thing you know, you attended a WordCamp, then you started managing and contributing with a WordPress meetup, and then you end up helping the WordCamp.
Yeah. So after I felt like I'm giving a lot, helping out. So I not only helped out the Boston WordPress meetup group, there's also a Marlboro WordPress meetup group, which is just an hour west of Massachusetts. I helped them get sponsored by GoDaddy. I know the Rob Petrin, who's the organizer there. And I joined that group as well, I talked to the organizers, I talked to the attendees. I was like, you know what, can I do beyond my region? So the next one was WordCamp New Jersey, Montclair, WordCamp Montclair in New Jersey. And I was like, you know what, sign me up. I want to be an organizer. I want to help you guys out. I initially I had no plans of actually trying to get down there. I just wanted to do social email and doing any assets that they needed. But they also said that, hey, if you have time and space, please come down and help us out physically. So I drove down there in June 1st, or well, I got there a few days early, and I became an organizer and helped them out at the front desk. I helped the attendees point out where the rooms were. It was really great. That's where I met a whole bunch of other people. It was, I think, a total plus the speakers were 100 people that attended,
Yeah.
120 or so, and it was great. The speaker dinners were great. The after parties were great. Getting to know all these people in that region was amazing. Um, and now I just want to know, like, what is the flagship like, where you don't only cross barriers between region within the United States. You have people coming from other parts of the country who are interested. Um, yeah, that's it. I mean, it's an amazing way to kind of get to know the people in the community.
Yeah, it's similar to yourself. I did the stuff in California. I did the San Diego WordCamp, then I did the meetups, then I did the virtual meetups. And then Thomas from Lifter LMS, when he was still with Lifter, he was an organizer at WordCamp Phoenix. And I was like, well, dude, I love you. I'll come out and support that. And he was like, really? And I said, yeah. So I ended up going out and doing a few days. I took my truck out there and I camped, and I really enjoyed it. Like, people were like, oh, where'd you stay last night? And I was like, here, come here, look out the front door. You see that mountain up there? I stayed up there, with my mountain bike. And mountain biking in the Phoenix area is tremendous. And it just turned into a really great trip. And like you said, you meet all these people. It's one thing to meet them at the WordCamp, and then you mentioned it. So I'm just gonna pull out the stops for all the people that aren't aware of this. The after parties are off the hook. So, I'm an old dude. There's no way around it. Just look at my beard. You go, that guy's got some time on it. After these events, there's these giant sponsored after parties. And so if you're working in WordPress and you're not aware of the community and you really wonder what this is like, or if we sound like, we're drinking too much Kool-Aid, it wasn't Kool-Aid. You get to these parties and there'll be open bars, restaurants, food, entertainment, and the people and the generosity of the people at these events, to me, is just off the hook. You end up connecting with people through Twitter, through LinkedIn, X, we call it X now. And, you find out if they're on post status or not. And you just make these connections that don't really seem to go away. So as you leave this event, I can remember in Phoenix, I met someone that was from the Ukraine, and then she now lives in Spain. I still follow her on her, different videos and stuff that she makes for YouTube. She talks about core web vitals and things like that. And she's rebuilding this house in the middle of the country. And it's you get to learn so much about folks. Like, people that follow me, they go, oh yeah, he's that web guy, but he also rides mountain bikes and used to work for Ducati. Like, everyone knows me as the Ducati guy, right? And then in your case, James, people know you as, a developer, a nonprofit guy. But in your circles, what do you think people recognize you for outside of that?
I don't think I have much of a limelight on that yet, other than just, other than a graphic designer who's also a web developer.
Well, there you go. There you go.
I mean, other than that.
I am design handicapped. I tell people that all the time. I find gentle humor in that, but some people are shocked that I would admit it. If someone gives me the graphics and the color palette, I can make an amazing website. But if you give me an idea and ask me to craft a logo and graphics to go with it, no, we got to talk to someone else on my team, someone that has that gift.
Yeah, I mean, right now I think there's ever since Gutenberg was introduced, I left WordPress to kind of dabble into other technologies in 2018, and then when I came back, it was a whole new palette, really, and there's a whole new way of kind of building out your interface. And in my honest opinion, it's like I think obviously it's a bit of a contrast for some folks, but I think if you just play around with it a little bit, you'll get the hang of all the different components that you get to utilize. I know that 6.7 is currently in like version 3 beta right now, and it's going to have more blocks and more patterns for you to kind of click and drag,
Yeah.
make it more easier for you to kind of just build out interfaces. You know,
Yeah.
my personal website is really just built off of the TT4, which is 2024 theme. Like I didn't want to customize it too much. I wanted to purely work with just the theme, just to play around with it and move the pieces around. Because a lot of businesses I work with, they don't have a lot of money, and so I basically try to customize some kind of interface so that uh, that works for them. Because what they need, considering it's a nonprofit, is donations and your mission statement. So really, everything needs to be captured at like the first 2-3 seconds when you're on their site. And so that's why
Yeah.
I try to tell them, like, don't overlay too much stuff. It's good to have a lot of content, a lot of images later on in the site for SEO marketing purposes, but when you're out there campaigning for your organization, you really want to say, hey, here's my website, here's the link. And then when they pull up either on their desktop or phone, they see your mission statement, they see what your organization is about and what they want to do and how they want to help society. Here's the donate if you like to donate. So that's my spiel right now with a lot of clients I work with.
Well, you mentioned it in your answer earlier, and I'm just going to go down this path. You might not have been expecting this, so I apologize up front. But you said you had explored kind of other tech options, and so, like a lot of us, or some of our clients, you come in with stories about Wix and Squarespace and Webflow and Dreamweaver, if anyone's old here. What do you think is the advantage to WordPress? Because you're obviously kind of focused on WordPress, right?
Mhm.
So when you're talking to a client, what's your focus of staying in WordPress as opposed to jumping into a Shopify site or some other kind of option, Kajabi?
I usually tell them it's privacy and also ownership of your content. That's really, really the most important thing. It's not proprietary software. You're not locked into any type of membership of whatsoever. And it's scalable based on the different types of applications that you like to pull in. So it's an open ecosystem where if you want to do something, if you want to apply a learning tool, if you want to apply a donation tool, if you want to apply sort of a new form, there are pieces of software out there. But when you're utilizing Wix, Squarespace, yes, they could get a site up and running, but there's all these other elements that you want to start adding to the site, and the complexity of depending on how complex you want the site to be, sometimes that option might not be available, or sometimes you might have to fork over money per month in order to even get that application. And you're paying per month for that application. Whereas opposed to you get a license, some of those applications, it's like a one time and you get to own that piece of software.
Yeah.
So I think that's the benefit of WordPress, really.
Yeah, we're very much aligned in that area. I've looked and I've looked recently again, and I said, okay, if I was gonna not jump ship, but if I was gonna transition to something, what would I look at? Pardon me. And I know that there's some people that are, looking at Webflow, and I know some people looking at Wix Studio, and there's some things that are happening in the space. Kajabi just yesterday sent out an email that said we're completely new. I have no idea what completely new means yet, right? I'll look into it. But a lot of these different platforms are trying to, in their marketing message, kind of emulate a WordPress like, own your content, own your stuff. But I really don't think, unless you're in an open source environment, that you really own your stuff. And what I like about WordPress is if I don't like my host, I can move the site somewhere else. But if I don't like my host on Wix, I'm stuck on Wix. It's I don't put Wix on something else. It is what it is. You subscribe to it. And so I get really, really kind of interested in how other agencies kind of approach that whole subject. On a percentage basis, with the people that you work with, what percentage do you think actually care what the website's on?
Um, Honestly, I would say 90% of them really don't really care what platform you're on. They
Yeah.
just want to be able to run their business. But I try to give them the best benefit for the amount that they're paying me for. Um, and hopefully that they'll be able to grow within that platform. Yeah, I'll give you a short story. Like before 2023, I worked with a startup and we utilized Webflow heavily for the marketing site. Um, Obviously, the company wanted to grow and expand. Turns out that if you, I mean, this is according to the head developer. He said that he tried to reach out to the enterprise, and you have to pay an enterprise fee in order to expand your code base. So there was a line limit of 20,000 lines of CSS code. And there was also a line limit in the JavaScript that you can embed. So as a developer, I was like, this is handicapping me. Like, I can't do this. Turns out that you technically can, per page, you embed the code on that page. So if it runs on a page, that code runs. That seems, I mean, it was kind of a bit of a hassle to kind of go back and forth. Whereas opposed to, I get to see everything in my IDE and I can kind of cross-reference things. I can pull things in and out. It was a lot more flexible. At the end of the day, does the client really care? I know that's like, just give me the synthetic oil. I need to change the filter and, windshield wiper fluid, and I'm done with my
Yeah.
day. So, it really depends. Um, but I would really hear, like, you should pay attention to client and like understand what their needs are and what their budget is first. From there, you can then suggest them anything you would like.
Yeah. I like that. I've been coming across a theme in a lot of people I've talked to in business lately. And it's not just about WordPress, it's about business in general, as we cover here on the Mañana No Mas podcast.
Mm.
But a lot of folks have noted from a sales perspective, a lot of us professionals have spent too much time trying to explain what we do or how we do it, as opposed to what problem we're going to solve. Right? Customers don't care if it's on WordPress or Wix or Weebly or what. They just want to know, is my website up? Does it work? Does my website convert? Does my e-commerce cart fill up with money? That's all they really care about.
Mhm.
And the more that I've begun to adopt the reality that that's true, I found a lot easier it was to kind of sell the product, because now I'm not trying to explain, I'm going to use this plugin and that plugin and an integration and this and that. Now I'm like, you want to put some courses in? You want your members to have access to a community platform? Great. We can have that up for you in a month. And they're like, oh, you can? Yeah, we can. It'll cost this much. Do you want to do it? Yes or no? And it's like, wow, that actually worked. I didn't have to go through all the details.
Yeah, there's a lot of projects I dove into in the past where you basically inherit whatever the past developer or company had utilized and has suggested that client. And obviously, they must have sold the idea. But sometimes in the end, when I talk to a client, whether it's a revamp of a site or completely built from scratch, usually I try to figure out what exactly is their business plan in the next year or two. What do you want to achieve? And then also trying to figure out, how do you want to elevate? If it's an e-commerce site, I mean, I'm at this point, like, I obviously am heavily on lean towards WordPress, but I'm also, somewhat platform agnostic if necessary. Like if Shopify works better for you, and it's selling you stuff, then we can work with that. But if you prefer WooCommerce because that's what you had previously had installed, we can work with that as well.
Yeah.
If there's a donation form that works better for you, sure. But if there's another one that you want to try out, we'll try that. It's you know different coat of paint on a car. You can you can change the tires where you want. The springs, the shocks can be changed. The mufflers could be different. The gas types could be different. It's all customizable, to your liking. I try to make sure it's the best fit for your business.
Yeah, it's perfect. Well, speaking of business, I want to respect your time, and I know that we've been on here for a spell. Um, if you were to think about like what your avatar is, right? A listener, a viewer is seeing this podcast and they're thinking, "Hey, this might be a guy I want to do some business with."
Hmm.
What's a good fit to work with you, James?
An avatar?
Yeah,
Like,
like your perfect customer.
ideally it probably would just be, is it organization based, or is it, so I still like to work with nonprofits, but I think uh Amnesty International would be like a nice one. If I were to choose a
There you
client,
go.
yeah, I would like to work with them, or um, some kind of humanities aid one as well, like the Red Cross. That'd be really great.
Yeah. Sweet, sweet. And so when you mention those, I think to myself, so that's more than a nonprofit that collects money and distributes money. That's like it's more like a nonprofit that does collect for giving, but also provides services and initiatives.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, sweet, awesome. James, what is a really good way for people to reach you other than the jameslau.com that's already on screen?
Yeah, the best way to reach out is to obviously the website, or to go on LinkedIn to find me. James Lau is, there's a lot of Laos out there, but if you type my name along with WordPress, my name will probably most likely come up.
Nice.
James Lau Boston will probably most likely come up as well.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, I just want to go on the record again as saying it's been a pleasure getting to know you over the last year or so. I hope that our listeners and viewers that see this have reason or cause to reach out to you. I've been super, super impressed with your input and your generosity as far as the community goes. And I wish you the best with everything.
Thank you so much.
All right. Say
Okay.
goodbye to the folks.
Bye bye.
All right. And end the streams.